Hello and welcome to the court of the Wenton King. Welcome to the land of confusion.
This week we are continuing our quest to review the Yes albums of the 70s.
Ish, yeah.
And we're doing
Close to the Edge. In a way, it's their definitive album. It's probably my favourite album, although it doesn't feature my favourite song. It is not, it doesn't feature coolness. It doesn't feature important clothes. It doesn't feature fashion, or it isn't cool, or any of those things. It's not about my baby's left me. It isn't my dog has died. It isn't about the night of the fire. It isn't any of those things, and it doesn't sound like Metallica. Importantly,
that seems to be a running theme for Yes albums.
It is a running theme that they don't sound like Metallica, which is important because you don't have to sound the same as everybody else, and the fact that it doesn't sound the same as anything else is a good thing. Yes.
If it's not about clothes, and it's not about, "Ooh baby, I want to hold your hand until the end of time" malarkey, what is it about?
It's about music. It is music for the sake of music. The language of humanity. So yeah, this is a natural progression from the last two albums. There's only 3 songs on there because you've got a near 20-minute song which took up a whole side, and then you've got 2 8 or 9-minute tracks on the other side. So 3 songs, yes, but one sprawling epic. It is where they got to where they were going with this album. It's all about the interaction between individuals, and it's not that they were getting on or anything like that. It was extremely sort of abrasive environment, particularly for Bill Bruford and Rick Wakeman, I think. But they were all arguing. Famously, when Rick Wakeman joined the band, his first jam with them, he thought they'd split up because Bill Bruford punched Chris Squire, but that was normal.
Well, success in a band doesn't necessarily mean getting on it. It's more about the Venn diagram of musical taste and stuff like that works between the members.
Yeah, something happens. This is where the planets aligned by mistake. It's not that they consciously sat down and right, we've got to make the next album now, and it's got to be the next stage. It was actually constructed in the studio over time when they were touring, so they'd go and play, come back from playing, set up the drums and everything again, record the next bit of the song, go away again and do another gig, and come back again, set it all up again, and they would actually construct the song as they went. And from Bill Bruford's point of view, they got lucky in that it works so consistently and so completely. It was purely a natural thing, and that's why it's so good. It happened through the interaction of the individuals, not someone thinking, well, we've got to do an epic now, so let's make it a side length epic. The music just came out from somewhere.
What I get from it is that there's actually a couple of things going on, and we've got some people pulling in one direction and someone else going in quite another. The confusion for me is sort of, when I read sort of John Anderson's comment about this before I even listened to it.
Right, okay.
He sort of presented it almost like it was a concept album, and it's obviously not.
No, it's not. No.
He was saying it was born out of a book he'd read by Herman Hesse,
That's the track, really, though. The track Close to the Edge.
I honestly don't feel that the musical side of things and the lyrical side of things are really in the same area, really.
That's interesting. I disagree exactly that, actually. That's exactly what... If we get let's talk about Close to the Edge.
Yeah.
This is the in a way, in some ways, it's their definitive thing. 4-section piece with themes running in and out and variations on themes. Sometimes quite subtle variations on themes.
But the themes that come out of the book, I don't see how that translates to the music that they're making. The Siddhartha, which is what we're talking about, brought together more than just Eastern religion. It was actually a Western type. The real genius of that piece of work was it was written by a Westerner.
Yeah.
And brings together sort of Eastern religious traditions and sort of Western psychoanalytical practice and all sorts of stuff. And it's written by a man who, it's about sort of like a spiritual, not almost like a spiritual awakening. It's about a guy he seems on a very set path, and he realises that there's something not quite right about that path, and he wants to go on his own sort of spiritual journey.
Yeah.
So therefore, I was expecting to hear an album which would sort of either add to that story or reinforce that story somehow. Either there would be a journey in the music, which would go from
one place to
another.
Yeah.
And it's not there.
No. I mean, what I was going to say, this didn't work for you, but I think what's really important about this track that's different to other Yes epics is that the way you listen to it, you can listen to it in the way you listen to, a classical piece, or I don't mean classical, I mean classical period or romantic period and that kind of thing, and you can listen to it as a rock song. That's what I got out of it. And this is my first Yes album. It's the first one I bought, and I liked that immediately. To me, it had an immediacy, but I think because I was tuned in specifically to that, that's what I wanted from it already.
What I do notice about Rick Whiteman is that sort of, as you said, sort of in the last episode, their music is sort of much more keyboard led.
Yeah.
The guitar led. I actually appreciate the guitar bits all the more for it. Steve Hay's got this. He's got a great way of letting the notes hang.
Yes.
Whereas Rick Wakeman just fills.
Yeah.
He fills the timeline, and it, sometimes it can become a little bit overpowering and sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Rick Wakeman is not, in a way. Rick Wakeman doesn't play prog. You could argue in that he's kind of superficial, and the way he embellishes Yes music is great, but there is a limitation to that, and we'll see that later on in the later albums. Yeah. The other person we should talk about is Bill Bruford, because he left after this album, and there's a famous argument where a journalist came in while they were recording, and it was right in the middle of Bill Bruford throwing paper cups at John Anderson, I think, and they're recording Total Mass Retain, and he's saying, what does Total Mass Retain mean? And famously he said, he didn't really care about the lyrics. He's a drummer and he was obsessed with drumming, but until the complaints came in, and then he started to get a bit unhappy about it. But the fact that Bill Bruford left doesn't mean that this was bad. In fact, it's his favourite Yes album, despite the lack of jazziness. The jazziness has gone completely by this point. But I think it's because he knew that was it. That was what they were aiming for, which is true. That everything led up to doing that.
On Fragile, the bass stood out for me quite a lot as well. Now there are bassy parts on here which I like, but it's sort of, I think it's lost a little bit in there. I think.
Yeah, it's not out the front quite as much.
No,
you're right.
And I think that's the Rick Wakeman effect. He's covering so much, so much ground, so it can be very difficult to sort of get anything else in there.
Yeah. So track 2.
And You and I.
And You and I think, whereas Close to the Edge is, you're very prototype symphonic rock, and You and I isn't really symphonic rock. It's more symphonic folk, really. It doesn't really. Is it a rock song? It doesn't really rock. It's loud and epic and wall of sound, but it is basically a folk song. It's very popular with Yes fans. There's something sort of important about it to Yes fans, in that it defines classic Yes rather than the bands they became later on. And when Bill Bruford actually rejoined the band, he was saying about when that song hadn't been played for years and years and years, and he was saying when they played it, the sort of wall of noise from the audience was the loudest audience response he'd ever heard in any band he'd ever been in, just from them playing And You and I. So it is kind of definitive Yes in a way, and it's the John Anderson melody and the nice folky rhythms, and then the big da 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 da. I don't think it's amazingly profound or anything, but I think if I didn't like that song, I wouldn't really like Yes.
I mean, it's another 4-section sort of.
It's supposed to be, isn't it? I don't think it has such distinct sections as Close to the Edge, and the recurring themes, but the themes just recur more like a rock song than actual variation.
Yeah, I mean, it did take me a little while to sort of pick out the Apocalypse, which is supposedly the last section.
Yeah.
And I think that's because, you know, the title is the Apocalypse, and you're expecting doom and gloom, and
Yeah.
it's not. There's none of that in there. It's a sort of.
No, it's just the next verses and heavy bit again.
Yeah. I quite like this because it's got the plinky guitar in there.
Yeah.
And I think I'm quite a big Steve Howe fan.
Oh, there you go.
Right now.
Yeah.
Because he manages to play nice guitar. As you say, it's not the Metallica sound.
Yeah, it is the anti-Metallica. He is the
yeah.
anti-Metallica.
Amongst the Bill Bruford drums and the Rick Wakeman keyboard, his guitar playing is very distinctive. And when the plinkiness comes in, it's like an old friend.
Yeah.
Almost.
Friendly. The friendly sound of the guitar. Yeah. It complements the heavy bass so well. And I think particularly, I mean, at this point, Chris Squire was extremely focused, you know, on Fragile and Close to the Edge. When he became less focused and more druggy, and became very sort of bow, 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 I don't think Bill Bruford would have been able to put up with him, to be honest, being the drummer. But obviously you've got that fantastic juxtaposition where they complement each other so well, rather than both of them just going. Bah.
Yeah, I mean, if you thought, you know, if you heard heavy bass guitar, sort of like acoustic guitar, you'd think that can't possibly work.
Yeah,
but it does.
Yeah,
it works very well. But yeah, I quite like Andrew and I. Rick Wakeman gets his bit. There's loads of layered keyboards in there.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm listening to it thinking, how the hell did they play this live? Because there's so much going on the keyboard level. Like how does he hold it all together?
Surrounded by keyboards.
Yeah. With his cape.
Yeah, with his cape as well.
Yeah.
Trip up over it or anything.
Yeah.
Syberian Khatru is the third song. I think this stands out from the other two songs as a, you know, it's the other thing on the album, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite fun. It doesn't feel like they're trying to say too much. It's quite funky.
Yeah. It's a straightforward song in a way, isn't it? It's not structurally complicated or anything like that. To a certain extent, it's a return to the Yes album style. I prefer it to anything else on the Yes album, but it's the return to the guitar domination. There's keyboards in it as well, but it starts with that you know, really guitar-y riff, and it's all guitar-y and the sort of Hendrixy, chordy things. I think bits of that are written by Bill Bruford. It sounds Brufordy if you listen to his solo stuff, but also he always says it's his favourite, which is surprising given how straightforward it is. So I suspect some of those riffs he wrote.
I mean, I liked it. It's okay. I'm disappointed I didn't like it more, really. There's in one of Vic Reeves' series, there's a pub called the Syberian Khatru, which suggests that Vic Reeves is a fan, which means I'm thinking, why the hell don't I like this more? Like, I should like it, but
that's one of the reasons we're doing this, though, isn't it? Because we know that there's something missing from Yes. There's something there that doesn't suit you, isn't there?
Yeah,
that's what we're trying to clarify. Isn't
yeah,
it?
I think I know what it is. I think the idea with the Siddhartha thing is good, and that really appeals to me. And I don't think they pulled it off as well as which is probably where my disappointment.
Yeah,
comes.
You wanted an actual album, a concept album.
I did want I wanted a concept album.
Yeah, John Anderson's thing, which is the controversial thing, and it's what was so unpopular at the time when they used to get complaints about. He'll go with something, but then he'll just be obtuse about it.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying it's more about the gaps in between the notes, and I'm sort of thinking, what gaps between the notes? Any gap. Rick Wakeman's going like that.
But I mean, if you listen to Rachmaninoff, there's no gaps in between the notes in that.
No. But yeah, that's close to the edge.
That's close to the edge. There you go. Yeah. So, I think there's something very definitive about it. It's at the time, people would have recommended Fragile as the starting album. I think. Now you will find people will say, well, that's the album you should get.
Okay, I prefer Fragile, I think.
So, join us in 2 weeks. We will be taking a break. The reason being that we'll be back for Tales from Topographic Oceans, and that's how long it takes to play the album through in its entirety. Bye.